you so much help.
You're on.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Calling the policy meeting to order, policy committee meeting, the Amityville School District, beginning at 6:09 p.m. With me at this meeting is myself, Second Vice President Chris Nearing. President Lisa Johnson may be attending later on, and Trustee Megan Messman was unable to attend this evening. I also have with me Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Gina Salver. I have Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Mary Stevens. Director of Human Resources, Dr. Lando, and interim assistant superintendent of finance and operations, Joe DeGrone. And Dr. Talbot, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, great. Good evening, everyone. So yes, come on in, make yourselves comfortable. We're gonna start with 8636, which is our regulation for our artificial intelligence policy that the board previously adopted. Tonight, we are prepared to discuss the regulation as to how we're going to outline our administrative steps to comply with policy 8636. And our assistant super for curriculum, Mary Stevens, will take the lead.
Great. So I think there are two versions. It's the one that I just handed you with the highlight in the middle of the page that we're going to look at.
Yes.
So the first section of the regulation sets the authority and the purpose of it. And so it's to establish a procedure for the selection, review, and approval of all Gen AI tools. And it lists the areas in which we need to comply. So we did reference a NISBA policy that we're hoping that we consider about student privacy, but also policy 5500, which I gave you a copy of, about student records. The Ed Law 2D, which focuses on protecting both student and principal personally identifiable information, and the newly created district policy 8636, which this would be the regulation accompanying that. The scope of the regulation would be any generative AI product or tool procured for student, employee, or contracted vendor use. So we wanted to make sure that anything that was being used in the district on our network for any individual would be covered by the regulation. The third section is about the procedure for vetting and approving new Gen AI tools. So that would, the vetting would come out of my office, the Office of Curriculum and Instruction. And all of the tools before we procured them, whether they were free or whether we were paying for them, would have to go through the process. It does outline the submission process, so anyone interested in purchasing or using a tool would fill out a form, which I think there's a draft in the other document that we have, a form about wanting to use it. Their supervisor would indicate whether there was pedagogical merit to the tool, and then move it forward to the data privacy officer, who right now is me. So it would all fall in that Office of Curriculum and Instruction. A review would prioritize the compliance with the Ed Law 2D, and focus on the privacy and security of students. So any of the tools that we use, we would need to know what data is being collected from them, how it's being protected, and what the plans are in the event of a breach to notify families, making sure that it is compliant with the Parents' Bill of Rights, all the elements of our policy, and any FERPA regulations. And there is information about checks that we would do to make sure that the tool remains in compliance throughout the year. certainly AI is an area where things are changing rapidly, and just because the tool is compliant when we procure it doesn't mean it will remain compliant, so there would be integrity checks just to make sure that the tool is remaining in compliance. Once it is approved by the privacy officer, the CAC technology subcommittee, the Office of Curriculum and Instruction would make a recommendation to the superintendent. And then once approved, it would appear on an approved list, which would be on our website and shared with staff and students and contractors. We did note that there is a possibility that the tool might be limited, so for staff only or a particular group of students. So that might be noted on the approved list. And then we wanted to make sure that there is continuous monitoring. So like I said earlier, we would do those integrity checks throughout the year and then annually just to ensure that the tools are still compliant, that they would sign off on their compliance. And that we reserve the right to suspend the approval should anything change or we determine that it's no longer meeting our needs.
So any tool that's approved, is that something that will just be accessible on a website from the Chromebook, or would it be an application that's installed?
So it varies on the type of application it is. If we can do it as a single sign-on, it would go on the class link, but others you might need to access them via a website, so it would vary depending on the tool.
Okay. Like, are they, it's like Chat GPT accessible on the Chromebooks now?
No. We're currently using, the only approved tool we have right now that's AI is Skillstruck, which we're piloting at Park. The Google Suite has Gemini. It's currently in a limited release for students. We've really limited what they're able to do, but we'd like to look at what we could do further with that, because Gemini is specifically designed, the student version, not to collect any data. So the way AI works is the more you prompt it, the more it's collecting data about you and the kinds of things that you're asking it. But the student version wouldn't do that. So we're really looking into that as an option for our students right now.
Okay. So, and like the Google one where it doesn't collect data, is that one that we have to pay for?
No, it's part of our package. There are, you could get higher levels of it. So we're looking at the base right now to see how that works. So I've been working with Pete on that.
I'm assuming that all the free AI stuff is free just so they could collect your data to repurpose it. So,
Yeah.
I don't think I have any other questions on it.
So we did receive a first round feedback review from our attorneys. And so we made a few changes, and if the policy committee is good, we'll go back for one more round and then perhaps could bring it for a first read on May 13th.
So the changes on here or changes like?
So our attorneys made some changes to this one that she just reviewed.
Okay.
And so we inserted the changes, we added a few things, and we can send it back for a final review by them. And then bring it for May 13th. So good. Good? Okay, great. So we'll make a note to bring 8636R along with the attachments, Ms. Stevens.
I did not review the attachments. I don't know if you want to do that together or.
Okay. So, Anne Marie, were the attachments on what we originally sent to? Okay. So the attachments were sent to the attorneys,
Okay.
and we can take a look and see if there was any feedback on the attachments. Thank you. Did you want to go to the 6,000s or would you like to stay here?
This, we can go through the 6,000 because we've already reviewed these in the past, right?
So. It's a lot of feedback.
Okay, yeah, we can do this, sorry, 9240, the hiring policy.
So the 9240 hiring policy. We've received quite a bit of feedback regarding that policy. And so our Director of Human Resources has been collecting that feedback as he's gone through the process, and we wanted to share some of that tonight with the policy committee. And he's also taking it another step to insert some of the feedback into a draft policy for your review tonight. Dr. Linda?
Thank you, Dr. Talbot. So you have two copies, one that is black and white, that is the existing policy. And then the second copy is one that has additions, redactions, and edits that are in color. And so as you read the revised recommendation, that Cabinet has also taken the opportunity to review and provide input. As you review the revised recommendation, you'll notice that there are some places that are struck that are in orange as opposed to red on the first page. Most of that has been reinserted later in the policy. Whatever was removed was taken out in red. So wherever you see a red with a strike through, that's a full deletion. Wherever you see green, that is added language. And I'd like to just share with you that much of this is as a result of the experience with the selection committees for administrative positions themselves. And so leadership from each of the bargaining units, they have opinions and thoughts that have been included in the revisions that you see. And so I'll try to walk you through just a little bit the major considerations that are part of this. One of the recommendations is that, and it actually comes from what occurred as we hired Mr. DeGome, is that the thought was that this would best serve for probationary administrative positions as opposed to probationary and interim. The board itself was required to suspend its own policy in order to move quickly and nimbly in order to appoint an interim person. And certainly having involvement of many parties is very valuable. However, given the short nature of things and the board's need and the superintendent's need to fill positions, it was felt that the policy would be best applied to probationary administration positions that are part of the AAA union contract and central administrative positions, including those like mine that might be managerial and confidential. The policy would apply to that. In terms of putting forward the process, there were certain things that participants found very cumbersome. Using a rubric to grade all resumes was seen as very cumbersome and time consuming, and many community members and unit members who were not instructional in nature expressed concern that they did not have the expertise to review certain aspects of resumes in terms of what we were looking for. As a matter of fact, many of the groups said to us, couldn't you go through this and tell us who qualifies and who should be interviewed, rather than having us spend all this time and not really knowing what the qualifications should be? So that's incorporated in this. Also incorporated as you read through the policy is a different balance of membership on the committees. One of the things that resulted on some selection committees is that it created the possibility that there were more non-employee members of the committees than employee members of the committees, because the existing policy says that there shall be 5 community members. That by a magnitude of 5 outweighed every other group that was represented on the committee. And so there's a better balance of this as you look at section 2, A and B, that for building principal and AAA positions that are district-wide, as opposed to cabinet level positions, there's a recommendation for 2 AAA members, 2 ATA members, 1 ACES, 1 CSEA, 1 CSEA2, 1 nurses member. And there's also an explicit provision that seems to have been allowed and yet wasn't clear in board policy before, that certain groups did not feel, when you look at the language, they did not feel that their interests needed to be represented on the committee. And so custodial staff did not feel it necessary to, for instance, serve on a committee for fine and performing arts. So the restructuring of the language here allows for the bargaining unit presidents, it specifies that they will say who their member is. However, if they choose not to recommend a member, then the superintendent or designee may either direct someone from that unit to participate because we believe it will be valuable, or allow upon the unit's recommendation that this is not something in which their unit has a significant interest, to allow that seat on the committee to remain vacant. One of the things that we noticed in the Director of Fine and Performing Arts selection, and we have a phenomenal person coming on board. Yet there was no art teacher on that committee. There was no music teacher on that committee. We found our way to excellence without having the input of people who had an interest in the selection and who would have been very valuable on that committee. So the restructuring of the policy seeks to remedy that as well. For cabinet level positions, I'm going to cite mine in particular. Every bargaining unit had an interest in the selection of the Director of Human Resources. Every person in the community was affected by that. Therefore, I would say that for positions such as that, it would be more likely that everyone should be represented on that committee. And that would be an important piece to take place. The other is that in terms of balance, rather than having 5 community members present on every committee, the board would again appoint 5 community members according to this recommendation, and yet 2 would serve on each of these committees. And the order of preference for serving would be established by the Board of Education, such that if a person said, I'm not really interested in this committee, we could move on to the next, but go in the order of the 5, the order of preference that the board would follow. The other part of this, when one looks at the process, is this is under 3, that the information shared during the process is confidential in nature. Community members and or members of the committee, any unit member who speaks out, committee member who speaks outside the committee is really violating a confidentiality protocol. People that apply for leadership positions often do so trusting in the confidentiality of the process such that their name, their current position won't be shared, because they do not want to have their current employer know that they may be looking for something promotional and have it influence or impact them in their present job until they become a finalist. So that aspect of things is addressed from number 3. In number 4, it speaks to training of the selection committee, and that's an important aspect of this. It's already happening. However, putting it into code or into the policy seems to make sense, to say that we're going to make sure that we're taking the steps necessary to avoid any legal challenges to the process that we're following. In number 5, it speaks to the superintendent as she currently does, or her designee does, establishing objective position-related criteria to be used and evaluated. We remove the word rubric because the criteria would be those things that would be assessed in reviewing resumes. And then the superintendent, at the request of committee members, the superintendent and or designee would select candidates for selection committee interviews. However, we do as a cabinet see value in the selection committee having some opportunity to see the full list of candidates. There are no secrets in who should apply as long as they remain confidential. And then if they see a candidate that they see a particular merit in, discussing that as a selection committee and being able to bring those people forward for first round interviews as well. So not at the exclusion of input from the committee. However, with the superintendent and her cabinet recognizing the attributes that they would want in positions, guiding the committee more fully than is encompassed in the current policy. Section 1 of the current policy is removed because much of it is covered in the other sections above. Number 6 deals with second level interviews. And again, the board has requested that there be no fewer than 2 candidates brought to the board for final interviews. That remains there. The language is adjusted to indicate probationary administrative position and be consistent with the earlier sections. The idea of the administration having observed the applicant in the teaching administrative setting or practicable is not something that is widespread practice. It is one that, in my experience in my career, has been a part of selection processes sometimes, both where I've been selected and both where I've led selection. However, the timing of things and putting into policy that where practical, it's typically less practicable than one would want. However, as part of the selection process and establishing the criteria and questions, the superintendent and cabinet all believe that having some type of activity in which candidates demonstrate their presentation or other skills or their knowledge is valuable. And that, in fact, has taken part in the selection process, even under current policy. This allows for that to happen. The administration will have spoken, rather than spoken, it says communicated directly with recent supervisors. Sometimes communications are facilitated better with email because schedules don't always match, and an iterative back and forth process. All recommendations shall be written, not oral. We have followed that process. We now have a reference form that supervisory references fill out ahead of time. And our practice is to actually follow up on those written references by calling and verifying certain things with it and asking further questions when there are questions about continuity and fully vetting candidates. So I believe that this allows for the continued fully vetting of candidates that we have followed. The board, I know, takes pride in really getting to know who's applied and where there are strengths and weaknesses among candidate pools. And so the policy language is adjusted slightly to make sure that the board has access to applicants' resumes, applications, and the rating summary data, which tends to be the process that the board is asked to follow and seems to make sense such that they have a full understanding of the selection process that led candidates to be brought to them for interviews. So that's a somewhat long-winded summary of the recommended changes that you see in the policy presented before you.
Thank you. So it's one question I had is when you were talking about the preference for the two community members, and you said, you know, they didn't really want to be in the committee. What is there other criteria? Because say we get 5 and they all want to be there.
So my recommendation to the board, as they choose the community members, and certainly the board might choose to have more than 5 people and rank them, depends on the position that the person is applying for. So for instance, for a high school assistant principal, it may be that a high school parent would be one of those people that would best serve on that committee. It might be that a middle school parent whose child is in 8th grade might be someone to serve on that committee. Having the board find a broad range of interests to represent people that might best serve on different committees. For an assistant superintendent for human resources, excuse me, a director of human resources, the board might want someone with that human resources experience, perhaps from outside. So the number 5 of approved community members is taken from what the board had put forward before. Perhaps the board might want to identify, without specifying a number, community members who might be valuable for input, and then have a ranking or suggestion for which committees they might best serve on.
So maybe like getting a pool of committee members and listing different qualifications that they might have.
Yeah, so perhaps it would be for building leadership position and expressing preference for which building level should there be a committee during that year. A district level position that would be a K through 12 with our current directors, our director for curriculum, and we have the director for fine and performing arts that we just hired, and the director of physical education, should that position become open at a particular time. Is there any director I'm missing? Director of PPS and special education. So for each of the areas, how might we best find community members for that? The concept of having the board approve or appoint them is one that I think the cabinet sees value in. Am I saying?
Right. So for example, for special ed, it would be great if we had a pool and there was a special ed parent on the list who would be a preferred call because they have a real vested interest in that particular area. as you stated, a high school parent or, a high school vacancy. So if the pool was greater and administrators had the liberty to match the interest with the vacancy, you're finding it would be more effective.
Makes sense to me, I think.
That's a good recommendation.
Yes.
And a lot of that came from,
This came from
more
input from
participating.
parents of, I would really like to be involved. And the community member contributions was very good on these committees. And their preferences for when they would like to participate was also very solid. However, we were not able to identify people who had interest from among those approved by the board for every committee, which is why codifying this at 2 makes the number more manageable and allows us to ensure that we have representation according to the wishes of the board and the community.
So any of the community members that were part of the committee, any of them cite the workload or anything like that as a reason that they had, those that had left the committee?
Following the first committee that I ran, when we had people in individually reviewing resumes according to a very detailed rubric, I received very direct feedback, and I asked for and received very direct feedback about the process, that it was simply too cumbersome. And for future reviews, we took 2 significant steps. One was that we simplified the rubric. And the second was that we endeavored to review the resumes at the same place at the same time. Because the discussion around the attributes that people see in candidates is more important than the number rating itself. Having that discussion among people who have an interest in the selection made a difference in ultimately identifying the best people for interviews. And I'm thinking about times that there were candidates who perhaps a member might not be sure of, that someone else would offer a point of view and say, okay, let's at least meet this person. And we have seen those candidates be successful in moving past the first round based on that community input. So the idea of the superintendent reviewing and identifying strong candidates or her designee, the idea of then giving the committee the opportunity to come together and see everybody that's applied and hear explanations as to why certain people were selected and why others weren't. And gee, do you see something that we may not see in wanting to bring someone forward? I think balances that process very well based on the feedback received from committee members.
I think also the brilliance of this is that now you have a pool of people, and if there are 5, and let's say there are 6 vacancies during the course of the year, so we'll go through the 5 people, 2 at a time. Maybe some people will get selected a second time, but not all 5 people have to be involved in all 6 processes, which is what the board policy implied when it said there will be 5 members of the committee. Those 5 people would have to be involved in each of the interviews. That's a lot of time. A lot of time for a community member to give for us.
Including the time to review the resumes as being overly burdensome.
Yeah, I think we really have to establish some kind of way to figure out that one particular community member, or however many, we don't keep skipping them because we feel somebody else is more qualified for that particular position.
Right. That's the whole concept behind the rotation.
Yeah.
The board numbers them 1 through 5, and we have a responsibility to go in order unless there's some very specific need.
Yeah, that's what I think we'd have to have, like, some levels of criteria. Like figure out, right, for this position, there's these types of things that we would look for in a community member. And then after that, if we have these people that kind of qualify, then we'll go by ranking or something along those lines. So that way we're not, so I feel like if we just go by ranking, we might have the best community member for that hiring is 2 steps below.
Right.
And we miss out, and vice versa. So
The other aspect that's important for every community member to come is coming with an open mind that they have neither decided who they must have in that position or decided that a person can't possibly in that position. They have to be open to the dialogue of the committee itself to help find that best person. And that everyone's voice needs to be heard and recognized. Part of the training speaks to committee members trusting each other enough when they have a different opinion than other committee members to share that opinion regardless, because you never know if someone else is thinking the same thing or if your opinion might sway the opinion of others around the table.
Cool. I don't think I have any changes that I would suggest to the new version of it. I think we would just need to discuss with the other policy committee members of the board how we, set that ranking, or if it should be 2 or 3 community members. Just from the changes I've seen, that's the largest change at that, and taking out the interim positions. As
Yes,
far as,
and it is my belief that the board would find itself suspending its own policy in order to appoint interims. Because the nature of interims is such that putting together full committees is doesn't provide for the timely appointment. And I'm speaking from my own experience first in a dual role as acting and then interim in a prior life, that the board needed to act quickly, and if there were a full selection committee process required for that, there would have been no one in that position at that time.
yes, I agree with that. But something like the criteria for the community, or the criteria for the utilizing the community members, that could probably be added on as a regulation, right? Don't
It
they?
could be, yeah.
I'll take what you've suggested and bounce it off some other people with the idea that perhaps community members who are parents of students who might be affected, community members with expertise in one or more areas, and then community members I'll try to flesh that out. For instance, we might want someone who represents an ENL child to be a parent who might be on the committee, depending on the leadership spot. We might certainly want someone who has experience with a child who has an IEP to be on the committee. We might want the opportunity for a parent who serves for students who is particularly gifted to serve on a committee. So there are a variety of parents that might serve, and we can come up with a way, and then a variety of community members with another area of expertise. So as I'm hearing what you said, perhaps a category of parent member for each of the committees is one of the two, and other community member with expertise might be the second community member, and we have a ranked list for each of those to serve on the committees.
All right, well, part of my thinking why making that a separate, like a regulation would be that I feel like could be something that might be more fluid, that once we're running through it a few times, you might come back to us and say, all right, this worked, this didn't, this we should change. And that way it's a separate document and we don't.
The regulation is much more flexible than the policy.
Yeah.
So
And that way it makes the policy itself less wordy. And
So perhaps some of the elements that are in the policy itself would be removed and put into the regulation.
Yes, is there
For
a
instance,
procedural?
the procedural things could go into the regulation as opposed to the policy and make the policy tighter. This is, as we discussed it, this is an extensive policy with much more detail than some. So the concept of a regulation that could include that, I'll take the time over the next couple of days to try to work and take ideas and bounce off, putting this into a combination of policy and regulation.
Because from what I've found from reviewing our policies and when I'm like seeing how ours compares to other districts, I've for the most part found it easier when things like this are broken into regulation, so then I can read the policy and say, all right, I need more information on this, and then jump to the regulation or the attachment, whatever it is.
That's an excellent suggestion.
The policy is meant to be the board's intent. The regulation is meant to be the superintendent's interpretation of the board's intent. So you adopt the regulation by saying, here, superintendent, you got it. That's what we
Okay.
want to be in place. And then the superintendent has the flexibility of saying, you know, this is not really working the way we wanted it to. We can't find 5 people who are willing to serve on the committee. Yeah, we have to look at the regulation. I mean, the board's policy could be as simple as, it is the intent of the Board of Education to hire and retain the most qualified teachers and administrators we can possibly find. And the rest of this could be regulation.
It's a great suggestion.
And that's all I had on that.
Can I just ask, is there a regulation now? Comments?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, is that what 9240R was? Just is that what we had and then we got rid of it? Was that what number it was?
40, I just looked just before, July 8th, it was rescinded,
Is it 9240 or 9240R?
I think maybe 240.
Okay.
I've only seen the policy. I didn't see the regulation, to my recollection.
The community member's been concerned about it, and I emailed the person and they emailed back that they were concerned about the 9240 part.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it from a number of community members as well.
In discussion about that community member suggestion, there was a question as to whether it would conflict with law. And so the current language, as we reviewed as a cabinet, by speaking about statutes protected by federal or state law, was seen as one that would not require change over time.
Okay.
So it was definitely July 8th that there was resolution to rescind policy 9240.
So this policy is no longer in effect.
Oh, no, it's still in effect. Until the board takes action to determine if there are any changes. 9240 is in effect.
I thought I just heard Anne Marie say that it was rescinded.
It was a motion to rescind or it was rescinded?
I saw a resolution on July 8th. I actually didn't go back to the minutes before me. Before my time to see that it was approved and it was assumed, which I should know. But I looked into the agenda, so this may be, I think, check to see if it's in the
Yeah,
minutes.
it wasn't, it's an active,
Okay.
That's.
it may have
or
been
I'm
a
saying-
motion on a table to rescind it, but it was not approved as a rescission.
Okay.
And so, is it okay for us to go up to 6,000 at this time? Unless you or Anne wanted to address 1230 or 1310. I know number 4 was trustee Meston.
I guess we could do that for the next. Since she brought it up, I don't know if she had any specific items to talk about with that, or if she sent any notes to Anne Marie about it.
No, the 13th.
No,
No,
Okay.
we just wanted to know.
Let me just add one more comment on 9240. Given the anticipated opening and selection of a new assistant superintendent for finance and operations, having an adjustment such that that committee might move forward more fluidly would be a timely matter.
Understood.
yes.
Understood.
Your servant.
I'm not sure who brought the, 2230.
I think Megan brought that up.
Okay.
I think also number 6.
And 1230, number 3.
That's the comment first.
Okay. Did we wanna move forward with discussion on that or circle back?
Except for 5 answers.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Special meeting on June 26th. There was a motion to amend the agenda to add item 9240R. And it was passed. 6 yes, 1 no. So
The policy
does that
now
mean
references 9240 as having been revised on June 26th, 2025.
Okay,
Yes.
June 27th. will be June 27th. But there's no regulation.
what's it?
So
It's
this was taken off board.
minutes for a special meeting on June 26th, 2025.
So there's a noted difference between the policy that you've given us and the one which I believe is part of our records, and the one that was pulled off board docs today, which I used as the basis for updating this. And there's a difference on the date on the back of June 27th or June 26th. It's possible we need to clear up which date is correct for whatever we have as published, as public.
Did we come back for 6 and 7? Not tonight,
Yes.
okay. So are you okay with us then going to A2A1,
Yes. 6,000?
6,000?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Draco, I know this has been an ambitious handoff. Mr. Schneider had done quite a job going through the policies. And so we know you have done a quick review of them as well. So if you'd like to kind of share any feedback regarding any of the 6,000 series.
Sure. I'm reading from the memo that Gercio sent to us about some of the recommendations that were made for amending the policy beyond what the policy committee originally did. One of them is to add FDIC insured institution to the investment policy. That is troublesome to me because there are a list of institutions in which the district can invest specified by the controller of New York State. The controller does not use the word FDIC insured. In fact, FDIC insurance only protects the district for its account up to $250,000, just like an individual account would be. Most of the accounts that we maintain have much more than 250,000 in it. So being in an FDIC insured institution is useless to us because we would have no protection above the $250,000 limit. Unless we follow the controller's guidance, which is that we need to have it in collateralized deposits. Which
What
is
does that mean?
beyond, what that means is that when we put money in a bank, the bank on our behalf secures treasury notes and other allowed investment vehicles and puts them aside for us. and says, okay, we've got your money. We've got 102% of your money in these investment vehicles that are approved by the controller, such as treasury securities. There's a bunch of them in the list. And should for some reason the bank have difficulty, you will be given these securities. 100% of your deposit will be covered by these securities. The reason why we use 102% is that the value of securities fluctuates with the market. So we want to have 102%, so that in case there's ever a drop in the value of those securities, we still have at least 100% covered. Yes, we do use FDIC insured institutions. In fact, every bank is required to have FDIC insurance. But there are other vehicles that we use that would not fall into that category. And I think it would be restricting us unnecessarily, because the end of that sentence, where they can bring the greatest return, well, if you specify that it must be an FDIC insured institution, you've just eliminated some of the cooperative liquid asset systems that are out there and other vehicles that the controller says we're perfectly allowed to use. I've had experience with a number of banks that use what they call a sweep system, where they take our money, we give them $10 million, and they divide it up into packets of $250,000 apiece, and they send those packets out to banks across the country. Each one of those banks uses its FDIC insurance to cover our investment, and the bank gets a reciprocal investment from those other banks. So those kinds of arrangements may not be eligible if we insert that language. So I would recommend against it.
Okay.
The second suggestion, to have two signatures on wire transfers and checks. Right now, we have one, Michael Kearns, your treasurer, who you appoint, is the person that impresses his signature on all of the checks. We do have a deputy treasurer, and I think that that's me. That, God forbid, Michael was not able to be here. I could actually take his signature disc, insert it into the machine, and cause his signature to be impressed on the checks. I've worked in districts that have required two signatures. It is cumbersome. One district I work in required the district clerk and the district treasurer to both have their signatures on a check. We now have a part-time district clerk and a less than part-time district treasurer. For us to issue checks would be very cumbersome. They both have to be here at the same time. I don't think it's wise to do that. I recommend, as the attorneys have said, that be not be entered into the policy. It's just cumbersome. You already bond your treasurer. Let him be the person who puts his name on the checks.
So that when there are safety measures in place before the checks
Absolutely.
get made.
Before a check is actually released, the invoice that comes in from the vendor is matched to the purchase order that generated the invoice, which is matched to the receipt copy where there is a signature indicating that the goods were received. That packet is then put together by the person who actually prepares the checks for the treasurer to sign. Then that whole voucher packet, from the check on top, through the invoice, through the purchase order, through the receipt copy, is presented to the claims order. the claims auditor then signs off on that voucher packet. And then and only then is the check released. So there are a multitude of steps along the way before a check gets released. Now they can feel a little more comfortable.
Yes, yes, it does.
I remember when I went to Roslyn the first time, I was telling people that we have focused more of our time on how many signatures we can get on the head of a pin than on what we're really able to do as a children. But it's, you know, the pendulum has swung back to normal stuff, you know, and I think that we're perfectly safe with the process you have in place. Oh, and by the way, all of that stuff is reviewed by me when journal entries are made to indicate that there was some cash dispersed. I sign off on different rules. So it's not just the process with the claims order and the treasurer, it's also moves on the as well.
And about how many checks do we have each week?
Several hundred each 2 weeks.
Each 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. So the treasurer is probably not, are they comparing each check to what it should be or verify?
The claims auditor is.
The claims order.
Actually, the claims auditor does, there's a list that the claims auditor goes through. It's not just the mechanical process of matching up the dollar amount of the invoice with the dollar amount of the check. The claims auditor also looks to see that the purchase was made for an allowable reason. We can't go out and buy liquor. The claims auditor would say, no, that has nothing to do with schools, denied. And I say that not jokingly, because sometimes we get reimbursement requests for meals. And on the receipt, it says martini. Sorry, that's not, we don't buy martinis for people, right? That's why we require an itemized receipt. That's why some people don't get told that their receipts are not satisfactory. Because it didn't itemize exactly what we're buying, it was just a cash register taken. Well, I don't know what $26 was for, was that for a bottle of sequins or for, you know, a couple of gallons of milk? So.
Okay, thank you.
I think that the suggestion that the budget should reflect the views of the Board of Education is perfectly appropriate, as well as the administrators. In fact, it's your budget, so I don't see anything wrong with the suggested change in the method. And number 10, again, I don't see anything wrong with number 10.
Mayor, just for a point of reference, under policy 6,000 number 3. During reorder, you'll be bringing the approved banks. Last year Flushing Bank was brought, it's not FDIC approved, it's a high interest yielding bank. Based on your response,
New York,
did I get it correct?
New York class.
New York class. New York class.
The New York Cooperative Liquid Assets Securities System
Yes,
is one of those pools of securities.
That divides it up.
Yeah, that actually owns securities in a pool for everybody. And it has the highest yield. So we're always trying to balance flexibility. We want to make sure that the money is liquid, that we can get it as soon as we need to get our hands on it. Safety, we want to make sure that we're not taking a chance that the institution will fail. That's the whole purpose of collateralization. And highest yield. And of the three, highest yield is the least important to us. The last thing we want to do is put the fuel into an unsafe investment.
so that brings us to
Budget plan, that's 61 down.
yes.
So there was one suggestion about the balanced budget being provided to the Board of Education electronically for review 4 weeks prior. We don't have any objection to that. I mean, we think that that's appropriate, at least for 4 weeks. I mean, I'd love to get it to you, 2 months in advance. Because the budget needs to be discussed fully by the board before we present it. The only thing you couldn't do is to say it must be presented 20 days prior, because we have to submit a property tax report card 24 days prior to the budget vote. That's the drop dead date. So having it 4 weeks, 28 days, perfectly appropriate.
Okay.
The next one I see is 6110R. We don't see any problem with the omission of, I don't know whose suggestion this was, but next to the last bullet, it says the tax levy limit for the upcoming year will be part of the budget planning process. Tax levy limit must be, so that I don't know if you remember this, but March 1st was the date we had to submit the tax levy limit.
Right.
And the possibility of voter override of the limit if necessary. No, it's not necessary to have that in your policy. If the board decides that they're gonna violate, that they're going to exceed the levy limit, you'll be advised, okay, we need a 60% vote. You're gonna do that.
So does this, what,
We don't have any objection to anything that, I think these were Megan's suggestions.
It was a combination on the back, but what you're pointing to is the attorney's office. Suggested it on 6110R.
Yeah.
Was the suggestion on 6110 and presents to the Board of Education, was that reviewed by the attorneys?
Yes. Yes, because the attorney said the omission of voter override is permissible, or the suggestions of additional language are acceptable.
I'm looking here. Oh, this is as of 10-6.
Right, that was already reviewed by the attorney.
Okay.
These are the additional changes that they reviewed.
Okay. Thank you.
You good so far?
yes, sir.
6240R. That is, those securities are authorized by the controller.
What page are you on?
Page 3. The suggestion was made that we delete as one of our collateral options. Obligations issued or fully guaranteed by the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. To the top of page 3, Chris.
I guess I don't think we printed copy, well, that's at the bottom of page 2.
6240R.
Yeah, I see the
Oh,
wording,
okay.
it's just at the bottom of.
On the bottom of page 2, yes. It's 4B. Now, the only problem with reading 4B
Okay.
is that it is allowed by the controller. So you, in essence, as a board, would be saying, we don't care what the controller thinks, we don't like those kinds of pieces of collateral. And I tell you the truth, I don't know how I would implement, because if I said to a bank, I'll give you my money. You secure it with collateral. You have to give me 102% of the value of my money. Oh, but by the way, I don't want obligations issued by you. And the bank says to me, well, wait, the controller says they're okay. What are you, why are you special?
So this is us like indirectly giving it to those institutions?
This is us giving it to those institutions and then saying to them, by the way, you may think that you're allowed to use obligations issued or fully guaranteed by the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, but not for Amityville. That may limit the banks that we could
Okay,
put money into.
I guess that was explained the last time we went over, because I remember speaking about this and
Yeah.
it seemed like, or at least my impression was we were giving it to an Asian bank or an African bank.
No.
That.
No, this list for A through K is actually in the controller's regulations.
Okay.
You could replace the whole thing with as approved by the controller. But if you want to list them out, it's fine. I just think that you may be limiting yourself in the number of institutions that you could put money in. I gotta tell you, I don't know. Right now, we have money in Flushing Bank. I don't know if the obligations that they have segregated for us include obligations fully guaranteed by the International Bank. So I'd be spending, if you eliminated this, I guess if I was due diligence, I would have to look at all the obligations that they issue in the collateral and say, oh, you can't use that one. I'd be spending a lot of time.
So maybe when we present this to the rest of the board, we leave this in there, but then provide an option of the the short sentence that you just stated.
With obligation. Those approved by the New York State Controller.
So
As
just
opposed to-
knock all. So we can show the rest of the board A through K,
Right.
and then the other option would be that.
For the purposes of this policy, eligible securities shall be those identified by the New York State Controller. Period.
Because then that way we're also covered if the controller decides to take out any of these from
Right.
their regulation or their
Right.
policy.
I mean,
Okay, that's a good suggestion.
the craziness is that you could, in your policy, say, we'll only put it in banks who give us gold as collateral. Great, sounds wonderful, doesn't it? What bank is gonna do that? You're gonna literally limit yourself to maybe one or two firms.
But Anne-Marie, did you get that wording? That's
It's, Emery, it's the end of paragraph 4.
Mhm.
The sentence says, for the purposes of this policy, eligible securities shall be those approved by the New York State Controller. And then what you're saying is, okay, controller, you make up the rules, we'll follow them.
And eliminate A through K.
And eliminate A through K. That's an alternative.
Yeah, so we'll present the rest of the board both options.
Okay.
So you don't have to go back just to update our policy because the controller
Exactly.
changed their standards.
Exactly, and in fact, if I may be so bold as to suggest to you, the last thing you want to do is have your policy repeat the law. Because the problem then is when the law changes, your policy becomes moot. Right? You may reference the law, and as the law changes, great. If your policy has to change, the attorneys will tell us. Like they told us with DASA and sexual harassment and all of the other policies, as the law revolves, okay, you have to change your policy board. But actually, incorporating the law into your policy was a mistake.
Thank you.
They also recommended.
Yes. There was also, this is from the attorney, remove the reference to local finance law, section 65, because it doesn't apply.
So where are you looking?
62 41.
Page
So
5.
page
under
5.
references, at the very bottom of 6240R, page 5. When you look at the references, it says local finance law, and there's 3 listed, 24, 25, and 65. They recommended removing 65.
Okay.
The attorney also said that that under F2, the suggested substitution of electronic or telephone is fine. They mean, to us, they mean the same thing.
Okay.
6,700. A purchasing policy.
Yeah, I know. This is really interesting because the suggestion is that we change the title to interim assistant superintendent for finance and operations. By the time you change the policy, you'll have an assistant superintendent for finance and operations. So I would leave it alone.
Yeah.
I think that it's understood when you refer to the assistant superintendent for finance and operations, you're referring to me. I mean, I know I'm interim. I know that I don't have the title assistant, but if anybody's looking to the assistant superintendent for finance and operations, they're gonna call on you. So just leave it alone. In the hope that you're gonna have a permanent person on July 1st, then what's the point of changing the policy and then changing it again?
I was wondering if there's a wording that could be in there, so. If, I can you think of an example of like, something comes up where this policy has to be referred to and. Then it goes back and says, oh, well, he's only intern, he shouldn't have been doing this.
Well, you could say assistant superintendent for finance and operations. Or in interim or in an interim capacity.
Or serving in an interim capacity, yeah.
Does the hiring of a purchasing agent impact this policy?
It
I
would,
think it would have to be added. Yeah.
you know, one of the things that we're looking at, as you know, from the budget, is to hire a purchasing agent. A purchasing agent would take the responsibility for the purchasing process off the desk of the assistant superintendent and put it on the desk of the purchasing agent. Somebody who could spend the time that's really necessary to research bids that are available, cooperatives that are available, to actually research the quality of the products that we're trying to purchase. That's really a full-time job. And I gotta tell you, in all honesty, I'm not giving it the attention that it deserves. It's just not the time to do it. So taking it off my desk and putting it on the purchasing agent's desk, yes, this policy would have to be revised because it would no longer be the assistant superintendent. It would be the purchasing.
So why not, under the general supervision of the purchasing agent as designated by the Board of Education?
There you go.
Or as appointed or designated by the Board of Education?
That's a great idea because then, since I've been designated by the Board of Education, you don't need to refer to me as interim or assistant or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm the designated purchasing agent.
So if the language were as appointed or designated by the Board of Education, if you appoint a purchasing agent, that person is in the role, and if you designate one.
So
They're also-
under the general supervision of the purchasing agent, strike the words, who is Richard Snyder, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, as designated by the Board of Education. That's the last sentence says, general supervision of the purchasing agent as designated by the Board of Education. And right now, that's what
Appointed or designated,
I was, when I was
Right, but,
appointed.
I think Dr. Lando said as appointed.
I'm
Or
wondering if the
designated,
phrase as appointed or designated, because the purchasing agent that we hire is going to be appointed to that role.
Right.
And that's until they're not appointed or until they resign or removed. And you're designated to serve in that role given that we don't have a purchasing agent.
Right,
I'm just looking to create flexibility in the language so that
Yeah.
it's covered without having to revise the policy every year.
so you want to change it to appointed, as appointed by the board?
As appointed or designated.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, having that phrasing in there, so it would be.
As appointed.
Under the general supervision of the purchasing agent as appointed or designated by the Board of Education.
That's great.
Yes.
So the auditor recommended that they. So we're just not following what the auditor thought. Recommend.
So the name be added in addition to the title.
And we should revise the policy every time the position changes.
And I agree with you, I just wanted to say we recommend.
In my opinion, it's never a good idea to name who is in the seat. Never. Because every time it changes, you have to change your policy. What's the point of that? You know,
Yeah.
you want the purchasing agent to be responsible. Whoever you designate to be the purchasing agent, you don't need the name.
Right, cause I'm like, alright, the day we. Hire our assistant superintendent of finance. That same day, we have to then update this policy, so then.
Yep.
We're not going against our policy.
Right,
And we'll leave that comment in there, so the rest of the board is aware.
I agree with you.
But
I'm just doing a quick check of other Long Island districts. Under the authority of the purchasing agent designated by the board, that's Manhasset. Let me check East Williston.
that's the district in Manhasset.
Oh, I chose that intentionally.
Look up Cold Spring Harbor, they're probably stupid too. And Roslyn. I've been around too long.
I thought Rossins was to give every member of the district a credit card to spend at will.
Are we good with that? Oh, he
I'm just gonna check another one.
So, yeah. Cause I mean, the most recent adoption date of this policy is. In September of 2018, so that's a lot of years gone by that we
Wow,
haven't had somebody's name in there. Or we had the wrong person's name in there, I don't know what it was before we made these revisions.
What about the other comments in 6,700? Did we cover?
yeah, there was one that said, it was just grammatical. Should be deleted in the last sentence of the second paragraph. Do you see where that is? In the
No.
last sentence of the second paragraph. It says similar procurements to be made in a fiscal year. It should be similar procurements made in a fiscal year. Will be grouped together.
East Williston's purchasing agent is district appointed purchasing agent or in his absence, assistant superintendent for business and other such school personnel, so they're even broader. And I think the tighter is better.
Yeah, and that sounds too risky.
It sounds too risky. I'm gonna have to talk with my the deputy superintendent for business, who, by the way, at one point worked here in Amityville.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Has that one.
Yeah. Well, that
But, you know,
policy
they-
should precede her.
Their central office is very small,
Small, so it's Diane Costanza.
It's
Yeah,
Diane.
Costanza.
and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's probably why they did that.
So the last sentence of that page, where it says other factors, we're gonna change.
Yeah, I agree with that suggestion. Last sentence of the section.
And I just found a district that does actually name the person, so. But I found two that didn't, so. I'd go in that direction.
What was the,
The district that named the person was Great Neck.
what years did they revise the policy?
They revised it recently enough. Well, you know what? I have to check as to when that policy was revised.
And
The
is
person who is,
still
that
there?
person is still there
Okay,
in the business office.
C1. We recommend adding the following sentence.
So, yeah, it's the top of page 2, Anne Marie, the suggestion was replacing other factors with warranty and delivery.
I see C1 at the bottom of page 2, so. Could you your thing again?
Yes, at the top of page 2,
It says
it
page.
is highlighted, bids or quotations on an item or service are identical as to price, quality, and warranty. And delivery.
You could show me tomorrow.
Yeah. Are you on this one?
No,
That's. So it's the purchasing policy. Not the shrunken one, but the full blown one. At
okay,
the top of page 2, other factors is highlighted in yellow.
okay,
You see it?
yes, thank you.
In place of what other factors, warranty and delivery. And the reason why the attorneys are suggesting this is because this should be a well-defined reason for selecting the product. Other factors should not be open to interpretation. Because my brother-in-law owns the company, is that an other factor? Because it's my friend who owns, because I've done business with him before? No, those are not other factors. Price, quality, warranty, delivery. Those are the factors we should be looking at. And that's what the attorney is suggesting.
The next sentence, in the memo said, under special circumstances, C1. We recommend adding the following sentence. Instead of
Yes,
suggesting-
so because he suggested that instead of adding the phrase, including but not limited to low VOC paint solvents and sealants, instead of adding that clause, you add the sentence, and the district shall make reasonable efforts to use low volatile organic compounds when practicable.
Yes.
And the rationale behind language like that is there are some things that are just not substitutes for others. Yes, I understand low VOC is important. We've got kids with asthma. We've got, people who react to that stuff. But I will tell you, the last thing I want to do is to clean up bodily fluids with something that is not a strong cleaner. Bleach or whatever it is. And if it happens to have VOCs, great. I'd rather take the chance that someone has an asthmatic reaction than the chance that someone gets sick, with hepatitis or whatever else is in that fluid. So where practicable makes more sense to me. That's where I would put.
okay.
And the attorneys have recommended that as well.
So Great Neck last revised its policy in December 10th of 2025, and the language has been updated and removed the name of the purchasing agent and changed it with language that says under the general supervision of the purchasing agent designated by resolution of the Board of Education at its annual organizational meeting.
See, even Great Neck. I never used to think that when I worked in Rossum. I always thought Great Neck was stupid, but
That's good feedback. We made a change similar or recommended a change similar.
Yeah,
Thank you, Linda. We're on 6741.
Yep, last one.
Okay.
This is just language that I guess the attorney feels is more appropriate than the language that was suggested. I don't have any objection to the language that the attorney has suggested. You can certainly live with that.
Any questions on 6741?
Yeah. Um, So we'll have 6,000, 6110, 6240, 6700, 6741, all for the next one, for the 15th,
May, is it May 13th?
13th.
That's our next regular meeting, right?
Yes. May 13th agenda.
Regulation.
Yeah.
And the hiring policy,
Yes. Are we okay to say 8636 AR regulation, AI regulation,
yeah,
and 9240 hiring policy?
yes,
Okay. May 13th, Board of Ed agenda.
And that's, we're doing a first reading, May 13th. How do we do policy revision here? Do we go through 3 readings or does the board?
do we have to?
We don't always go through 3. There are times when we've done a second reading and adopted, Anne Marie. But I don't know how you would recognize 9240 because it's already an adopted policy. If we're recommending a revision, would that be considered a first read? A revision or
Just don't know how we
Can we get
So that-
clarification
yeah,
from
a
Garcia?
legal?
And well, the other thing is, as Steve says, you've got an appointment coming up that you
Yeah.
really need that policy in place.
and I'll. If supported, I'll also, while asking for that opinion, I will also ask them to read through the language. So that we're not misstepping anywhere and we make adjustments at needed.
Right, so following policy meeting, Anne Marie would normally share these policies with Garcia. And then you would stay in the loop with her based on those changes. And then Anne Marie will also ask, how should we bring 9240 back in terms of a read? A revised, a first, or what would it be considered on the agenda? Good, that's right?
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
First and adoption.
Yeah.
I'm not, well, not suggesting we review everything right now, but just for the next meeting. I just recently found for relationship with booster organizations,
Mhm,
there's not a lot of districts that have much on their policy.
mhm.
Which was kind of concerning to me because now we're having other organizations work closely with our students
Mhm.
and with finances. But I found that Monroe Woodbury Central School District had a booster club registration form. Just quickly go through it. It's got the school name, the name of the club, the mailing address, the website, the name of sport or activity represented. It has lines in it. And I'll forward this to the committee. It has lines for the president, their name, their address, their phone number. Same for the vice president, same for the secretary, same for the treasurer. Says officers listed above are responsible for all communications and reporting requirements for the current academic year. They're required to give us their federal tax ID number. The date bylaws were accepted, date yearly budget approved. This form will only be accepted if the following items are attached. The federal tax ID number, the bylaws, current bank statements, and the annual budget. And then there's an open space on the bottom. Please outline your proposed goals and events the school year referenced above.
So if booster organization doesn't fill out that form, what does that mean? In that district?
That I don't know. I gotta, I don't even know if I really saw much of a policy. It was just the idea of this, and I'm not suggesting we follow this exactly.
It's a sample.
Yeah, because I know from experience, there's times where the building might request something at the last minute, and my thought is to put something in that protects the district, but hopefully doesn't hinder the ability for booster clubs to
Function.
effectively help the district.
Mhm.
I think we're from the around just, always worried about liability and stuff. The last thing you want is for a booster organization to take the place of the Board of Education. For example, I had a booster club in Hallfields. They wanted to buy a new sled football team, that long thing with the pads that the kids push. They learn how to
Yeah.
block and tackle with it, et cetera, et cetera. They wanted to buy a new sled. Why? The president was a big football fan, and all the parents were big football fans. Well, our football team had a sled. It's perfectly serviceable. But our volleyball team didn't have nets. They didn't have the uniform. So we said to the booster club, you know what? Thank you very much for your interest, but if you want to contribute, we'll decide what to do with the money. And they held to it because the board should be deciding what their priorities are, not the booster club. And I say that because if Evan Farkas went to an athletic booster club and said, I want to send the volleyball team down to Florida for practices, will you raise money for that? That should be something that goes through the superintendent and the assistant superintendent. It should not be something that Evan Farkas has a discussion with the booster club about. So you gotta be careful in how we grant the idea of saying, we'll recognize you only if you spell out for us what your goals are, what you want to raise money for, what you want to support. And then if you have a booster club that wants to support something that is really a need in the district, great, support them and let them do their thing. Am I making sense?
Yep.
I'm worried that.
I think you're
become
kind of,
shadow-
you're
they become
thinking
shadow.
along like my side of the brain that's saying we need to protect the district.
Yes, exactly.
So you're gonna send that
Yes.
sample to us?
I will.
What district is that again?
Monroe Woodbury Central School District.
One of the regional places where you could go to outlet stores.
Yes.
Used to make the drive up there before they were outlets and all that.
May I just, the Monday, May 18th,
Yes.
this room is utilized by a local civic association for their meeting. We can either reschedule or find another location. Oh, you said that here, Marie.
Yeah. Yes, she needs.
Oh, to the art room, okay, all right.
So the next day is the vote, so if you don't need me, I won't be there, but.
This day, we also have a potential budget meeting. Budget presentation where we're presenting
Yeah,
in the community that night as well.
I don't think it's very wise for us to tie ourselves up the day before an election.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we'll keep June 29th and possibly move something up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
is May 25th Memorial Day or?
Yes,
Yes, May 25th is Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
So you can't move it to the fourth Monday.
But we can certainly look at June. However, you know, June is really busy with the moving on ceremonies, the nighttime funds, events rather,
But June 29th, it'd be all over by then, right?
be all over by then. Yes.
When we'll be on vacation. Magdalena, can you send me in Word what you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You need now?
No,
Okay.
All right, I'll send this when we close up, I think that wraps it up, so we'll. Close our meeting at 7:39 PM.
Oh, This was very good.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
great meeting. Chris.
It's a lot.
Thank you very much.